Hello, and welcome to today's web briefing, The State of New Jersey's Nonprofit Community. I'm Linda Czipo, President and CEO of the New Jersey Center for Nonprofits, and it is my honor to present today's session. I'm joined behind the scenes by my center colleagues, Danielle Robinson, Debbie Duncan, Kathy Hahn, Doug Schoenberger, Rosalia Velasquez, and Emma Wagner. We have a lot to cover today, and we'll be going through pretty quickly, but we are recording the web briefing, and you'll receive a link to the recording along with the slides and other follow-up information after the session by email. If you have any questions or any technical difficulties, please enter your question into the chat box. Feel free to ask substantive questions at any time, and if we can't answer them during the course of the presentation, we will address them if time permits, and if we can't, we'll follow up afterward. For those of you who may not know us, New Jersey Center for Nonprofits is our state's statewide nonprofit network and champion for the charitable community. For more than 40 years, we've strengthened nonprofits individually and collectively through public policy, professional education, guidance, trainings, conferences, cost-saving member services, and much more in order to improve the quality of life for all people of our state. The New Jersey Center for Nonprofits is a proud member of the National Council of Nonprofits, the nation's largest nonprofit network with over 27,000 organization members in more than 40 states. The Council of Nonprofits serves as an advocate, central coordinator, and mobilizer to help nonprofits achieve greater collective impact in local communities across the country. If your organization is already a member of the New Jersey Center for Nonprofits, thank you so much for your support and involvement as we pursue this work together. If you're not a member, we hope you'll consider joining and experience firsthand how membership can work for you. If you join by March 31st and use the discount code HORSENJ, then you can get 10% off of your dues. And we'll repeat this offer toward the end of the broadcast. As part of our work to improve understanding about nonprofits and drive sound public policy, we regularly survey New Jersey's charitable community about the issues, challenges, and opportunities they're facing. One of these is our annual Trends and Outlook survey, where each year we poll New Jersey nonprofits about how they fared in the last year, outlook for the year ahead, and other topics and concerns. This survey is designed to help you in your planning, fundraising, and advocacy work, and it's absolutely crucial to our advocacy and programming throughout the year. If you took the time to complete the survey, thank you so much. We appreciate the time you took to share your insights with us. And we are also deeply grateful to Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey for generously supporting this year's report and our work. And I'm proud and pleased to invite Renee Woodside, Associate Director of the Horizon Foundation for New Jersey, to say a couple words before we begin. Renee?
Great. Thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. As Linda said, I'm Renee Woodside from the Horizon Foundation for New Jersey. We proudly serve as the philanthropic arm for Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. Thanks so much, Linda, to you and your team for all the amazing support that you give to the nonprofit community, of course, but also to us as funders. And this report is a perfect example of that. I was just talking to Jonathan Pearson, our executive director, about it yesterday and just how useful this report is. We use it in several contexts. So for example, we are in the middle of a strategy refresh for our overall corporate social responsibility work, and having this data as we think about how we support the nonprofit sector going forward is just invaluable. So Linda and I were also in Washington last week, I think it was, Linda, with the New Jersey delegation of Foundations on the Hill. And she shared some of the hot off the presses data with us for those visits with members of Congress and their staffs, which again was amazingly helpful as we were explaining to them the issues that affect the nonprofit community and why it's so important for them to support it. So we're very proud, once again, to sponsor the report, and I really look forward to hearing and reading further about the results. So thanks, Linda, again, to you and your team.
Thank you so much, Renee, and thanks again to the Horizon Foundation and the Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield for all your support, not only of our work throughout the years, but New Jersey's nonprofit community. We very, very much appreciate it, and we are proud to partner with you. So what are we going to cover today? We have a lot to go through, but again, you'll get slides, you'll get resources and whatnot. But we'll go through a little bit about some level setting about the nonprofit community, just some basics about the community. We'll review some overall trends and landscape of what we're seeing in the survey. Talk a little bit about what can we do as we look ahead. What are things looking like to the extent that we can tell. And then I'll just close out with some parting thoughts and loose ends. Again, if you have any questions along the way, please put them in the chat box. I will follow them as best I can, but very kind colleagues will also help along with that. So, basic stuff, we always like to start off with this, so some of this information may seem familiar to you, but it's really important to remember that in New Jersey, there are 41,000 plus 501c3 organizations, according to the IRS. Nonprofits employ almost 10% of the private workforce, which is more than many major industries, for-profit industries in the state. And that translates into 340,000 people. Nonprofits spend $56 billion and more in every year, a lot of that in the Garden State. So if we're talking about the nonprofit community, it is not just about the vital programs and services that nonprofits provide. It's the role that we play in making New Jersey an economically sound, fair, thriving place to live, work, raise a family for all of our residents. And again, the services, there's no way to cover every aspect of services that nonprofits provide, but nonprofits touch every aspect of our lives, whether people are aware of it or not. And that's going to be one of our challenges and opportunities. It's an ongoing issue. How do we make sure that our friends in government, the public, general residents, the media understand and appreciate just how vital nonprofits are? So that's going to be a recurring theme. So the survey, which is really the heart of today's presentation, we have conducted this survey at least once a year, every year since 2001. We try to go at the beginning of the year to take a pulse of nonprofits about how they fared in the previous year, what's coming up on the horizon. This year's survey was open from February 7th through 21st, and we had responses from 271 New Jersey nonprofits. So again, if you responded to the survey, thank you for taking that time. Your information and insights are invaluable. So here's the highlights. The too long didn't read, but we hope you will read. And some of these things, again, are not new and they're not unique to New Jersey, but we have certainly seen some shifts that I will go over in a bit as well. First and foremost, again, not new. Demands for services and rising expenses are still outpacing funding. This has implications for nonprofit capacity, for our ability to continue to serve residents in our communities, and coupled with some of the other things we are seeing, it creates something of an alarming picture. Workforce shortages are still occurring in the nonprofit community, maybe not quite to the same degree as they were reflected on our previous survey, but still pretty substantial. And again, that relates directly to how nonprofits can meet escalating community needs. And then, of course, and we'll be talking a little bit more about this as well, the recent directives and actions from the executive branch in Washington, D.C., and looming congressional decisions regarding budget and tax issues and whatnot really do paint a potentially dire picture about what it means for nonprofits to be able to meet their missions in service to the people of our state. So what did we see in our current survey? Again, something of a familiar theme here. Once again, demand for services far outpaced the increases in funding that our respondents experienced. Almost 4/5 of respondents said that demand for services had increased over the past year, but only a little more than half said their funding had gone up. Now, diving a little bit deeper into which categories of funding seem to perform best for some of our respondents. The purple on the left, this is what we want to see. These are the percentage of respondents who received those funds who actually received increases from that category. So you'll see 38% of nonprofits who received funding from individual gifts actually saw that funding go up in 2024. By contrast, any nonprofits that received federal funding, only 16% saw their funding go up. The red fuchsia blocks denote decreases in funding, and then the orange are flat funding. So again, these and other sources are in the full report, which will be available on our website as soon as this webinar is concluded. So you can see how some of these funds have performed. Private foundations, about the same proportion of increases versus flat funding. Corporate increases were a little bit less common, and you can go down the list. Now, in terms of where nonprofits expect to have the best success, this is a future prediction by our survey respondents. They are most optimistic about donations from individuals, also about special events, and a little bit less so about private foundations and corporate. And understandably, very few expect that funding from the federal government will be going up, and decreases are expected sharply. So, and state government, of course, is another huge variable, and a lot of that depends on what happens in DC. And again, just to drive home the point, because this is important to keep in mind, important to emphasize when we're talking to our friends in the media and policy making and in philanthropy. More nonprofits expect demand for services to go up than funding. More nonprofits expect expenses to go up than funding. And this gap is more pronounced than it has been in recent years. Typically, this prediction about funding going up is around 50%, which is still a concerning gap compared to rising demand and rising expenses. But this year, only a third, 35% of our respondents predicted that their funding is going to go up in 2025. So again, you can kind of see the implications there as far as what this means for potential services and capacity and our missions. On the labor force issues, on workforce issues, this year, about 40% of our responding organizations that had employees said they were experiencing staff shortages with an average vacancy rate of 17%. That's a little bit less than what we saw in our last year's survey, when it was about half of our respondents reporting staff shortages and an average vacancy of 20%. Now, of course, this is all very, very changeable, and a few months from now or a few weeks from now, this could change a lot, but that's what our survey is saying right now. Meanwhile, I'm not going to get into it, but technology and technological changes and challenges are certainly underpinning everything that we're doing as well, with great opportunities there, but also great threats, from social media to access to technology to artificial intelligence. We did see a little bit of an uptick in usage of AI among our respondents, but it's still a growing and emerging kind of technology, and there are um, a lot of resources and a lot of questions that are swirling around there. On diversity and equity, again, we can't have a conversation about the nonprofit community without exploring where we are with respect to diversity and equity. Now, of course, we also know that there have been sweeping policy changes introduced on the federal level, and that's certainly top of mind as we're talking about this. But we do ask in our survey if an organization primarily serves communities of color, and we do some comparisons among those who say yes versus the rest of the survey population. So about a little more than half of our respondents this year said that they primarily serve communities of color. They tend to be a greater proportion of frontline nonprofits, human services, health, et cetera. They tend to be more locally or county focused than the overall response pool. They were slightly more likely to report overall funding increases, but they were also a little bit less likely to report a year-end surplus, as in the end of their 12-month fiscal year. They were more likely to report a break-even outcome, and a little less likely to report a year-end deficit. So break-even was probably a little bit more common in among these organizations. They also, importantly, were less likely to report a cash reserve, and months of cash on hand were also likely to be a little bit smaller. Again, implications when it comes to funding interruptions or how nonprofits are equipped to deal with them. Another important piece to note, as some of you who have taken our survey may recall, we ask two questions actually, about we ask respondents to identify what are your top 5 issues concerning your organization and for the nonprofit community as a whole. And later on, I'll tell you what some of the top issues were. But in terms of this context and discussions about DEI, we've seen this in previous years, that there was a spike in concern and awareness in 2021 in particular, and then there's been a little bit of a downsliding since then. Other issues have eclipsed DEI as explicitly being identified as a top 5 issue. That is a cause of potential concern. There are also a number of possible reasons behind it, but it's just something that, especially as we are talking about the turbulent times surrounding the federal government and their efforts to eliminate DEI, it's something that we need to be aware of. So again, segueing a little bit to what's going on federally, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but we can't talk about what the nonprofit community is encountering without talking about some of this. So in the executive action blitz included, I think we may be above 100 executive orders by now, but certainly you've got a blizzard of executive orders, proclamations, memoranda, etc., dealing from anything from birthright citizenship to DEI to LGBTQ plus issues. Some of these very explicitly target nonprofits, philanthropy, private sector employers. Again, you can go on and on down the list, and these are the upheaval. It's really hard to overstate it. I do encourage you, if you haven't looked, the National Council of Nonprofits does have a running list of executive orders that they keep updated regularly, and this is their summary of which executive orders have the most direct impact on the nonprofit community, as well as any recent actions or new developments that might have occurred with them. So I certainly encourage you to check that out and visit it regularly. In terms of what that meant, what that has been meaning for the organizations in our survey, the impact has been pretty profound, both in terms of direct effects as well as potential disruptions. Nearly 2/3 of our respondents said that they receive some funding from the federal government, whether that is directly from the federal government or passed through the state. This funding funds, according to just in the organizations that responded to this question in our survey, this funds more than 4,500 jobs. So you can do the math and extrapolate out, and the federal government is a really, really important driver of funding nonprofit missions. So when those funds are interrupted or paused, the implications are significant. And we saw that at the end of January, when the government attempted to institute a funding freeze, or when other funds were canceled or interrupted. Some of those funds were restored, but it took some time and important interventions, which we'll talk about in a moment. But again, it's really hard to overstate just how traumatic and dramatic the impacts have been. As just a few examples, we did invite organizations to tell us in their own words how some of these actions were affecting them. And there are more of these quotes in the full report, and I certainly encourage you to look at them. But we're talking about organizations that have had to lay off staff, that were not being paid for services already provided, the implications on certain communities who are now fearful of trying to seek help. The uncertainty and the anxiety are pretty high. Now, what I will say is so far, the courts have been a very effective strategy to try to address some of these issues. According to justsecurity.org, another fantastic site if you want to keep track of these the court cases that are going on, more than 90 legal challenges were filed as of the other day. A number of injunctions or administrative pauses have been issued by judges in those cases, including a couple of really important ones filed by the National Council of Nonprofits, also 22 states, including New Jersey, other nonprofits on other pieces. So again, there's a lot to unpack there, but I certainly encourage you to check that out. That situation is constantly changing. So, but there have been some successes there. Almost certainly these cases will continue to be appealed, so we will have to see what the higher courts determine. And of course, that brings us to Congress. I mean, the court cases and the administrative pauses and whatnot have pretty much applied to funds that have already been obligated and approved by Congress, which of course is what makes the interruptions especially jarring. But of course, come next week, we have a deadline to either pass appropriations bills or extend the government or risk a government shutdown. And in the meantime, the House and the Senate are passing budget blueprints, which are pretty much mandating massive cuts because you can't do the math and not have a massive cut when it comes to these programs. Medicaid, of course, is one of the biggest ones, and the implications for New Jersey of all of these funding decisions are enormous. The state of New Jersey gets some $27 billion from the federal government, and the state's budget itself is kind of austere as well. So again, this is context, it's implications. It's not a pretty picture for sure, but it's something that we all have to keep in mind as we're trying to figure out what to do and how we cope. Let me pause for a second. I will see if there's any questions in the chat before we keep moving on. And anything that I can't address at the moment, I will certainly follow up later. I think right now we are good. I trust my colleagues will tell me if we are not. So,
There's a
okay.
question. There's a question in the chat. I'll post
Okay.
it.
I see the question about the VOCA cuts. I do not have specific information about that. Perhaps somebody on the webinar might, and please put that in the chat. Otherwise, I will certainly touch base with some of our colleagues and see what we can find out there. I had not heard about whether those funds had been restored or whether that was in the works, but that I honestly don't know either way, but I will certainly try to look. So, as I said before, as we're looking ahead, we're asking nonprofits to take a forward look to the extent they can. We asked them two questions. What are some of the top challenges to your organization's viability and effectiveness? And then we asked a second question about what are some of the most important issues for the nonprofit sector as a whole community for the next decade. So this first graphic is these are the most common issues selected by our respondents as issues affecting them. So you'll see by far the top on tops of the list, financial uncertainty. That's usually one of our top 5, but it's usually not to the tune of 65% picking it as one of their top 5. That is a clear reflection of the times that we're in. The possible impact of new federal government directives. Again, sweeping directives, potential and actual upheaval, and the implications there are very, very profound. The need for a stronger board is usually in the top 5, and it was again today. The cost of insurance and benefits for trying to retain staff, the growing and increased demand for program services, and the need for better branding and communications. A lot of these tend to recur year after year in our surveys, but Again, they've been supplanted by the top two issues here. Other issues in this list, and there are more. We asked about many more, which you'll see if you download the full report. But the need for advocacy, the inability to afford staff, all of these things also factor in. So we're talking about organizational capacity. We're talking about organizational survival, and how can we garner the best leadership for our boards. Now, on the nonprofit sector as a whole, there were also some changes compared with what our surveys often say. And foundation and corporate funding, again, that tends to be near the top of the list, and this is identified by nearly half of our respondents. Government grants and contracting, that was in the top couple last year, and it's back again. Federal funding and federal budget, again, these things make sense. They're not surprising given the climate that we're finding ourselves in. Nonprofit infrastructure capacity building, state fiscal policy and budget, and finally civil society and civic engagement, which has jumped up in the ranks compared to recent years, as well as attracting retaining board members. Again, that's usually in the top 5. If you see some of those that are not in the very top but still higher than others on our list, how do we improve public understanding and appreciation of nonprofits? Nonprofits are taking big hits in certain segments of the media and certain segments of our policymaking circles, and that has implications with respect to what gets enacted and how we can conduct our business. And then rounding out while attracting workers, preserving nonprofit advocacy rights, combating information and disinformation in social media, as well as DEI within nonprofits. Now, we also ask nonprofits, are you overall, is your organization better off, worse, or about the same as it was a year ago? And then we ask nonprofits to predict what you think the next year will hold. And unfortunately, the news is not good. This is a trend graph. It tracks from 2020 through 2024 who responded, what the previous year held for organizations. As you can see, only 1/3 of our respondents said that they are better off now than they were a year ago, and about 1/4 or more said that they're worse off. That's up from about 15% in 2023. So the circumstances and the attitudes and the confidence have dipped sharply. And this is also very apparent as we look to what nonprofits are thinking about the future. Now, a lot of organizations said it's just too early to tell, we just don't know. But those who posited an opinion, again, 34% fully, only 34% said they thought that they would be better off a year from now than they are right now. 15%, up from single digits, said that they thought their circumstances were going to be worse. So again, this is just a reflection of the recent state of events and the uncertainty that we've been finding ourselves in. It's not necessarily surprising, but it is very, very stark. And again, we invited people to tell their stories, and we appreciate those who did. The quotes that we share in the survey report reflect those that consented to have their stories shared. So I do encourage you to take a look at those to see what some of your colleagues are saying and see if that does or doesn't resonate with you. Now, if all of this leaves you feeling a little bit despondent and feeling a little bit put upon and like the forces are trying to suck the soul out of you, it's very understandable, and we can definitely appreciate why you might feel that way. What I would like to say, though, is that you are not alone. We are not alone, and we are not powerless to take action to address what we are facing. So what are nonprofits doing? These are things that you have probably already done or might have in the works. They seem to make good sense. They're pretty logical, but First and foremost, of course, trying to find new and alternative sources of revenue. Nonprofits do that all the time, and they're doing it again. Trying to increase capacity by way of volunteer recruitment. Efforts to increase advocacy are also on the rise. Contingency planning, if you have not been engaging in contingency planning, this is the time to do it, because even if you don't receive funds from government, the ripple effects on private philanthropy, on every corner of society and funding, and on individuals, everything is connected. So this is the time to engage in those kinds of explorations. Nonprofits are always, in my opinion, very good at collaborating and being creative about working together and pooling resources. And now, again, is happening more, and it's a perfect time to explore anew if you haven't been doing it. Programmatic and budget adjustments, that is, reflects all sorts of things, whether trying to comply or not run afoul of government directives, or try to address changes in how some of our communities are seeking services, or any number of other kinds of changes. Nonprofits are making them. And of course, and I cannot underscore this enough, more focus on well-being, wellness, mental health, self-care. Organizations are investing in more trauma-informed care. All of this is a huge, huge concern, and there's definitely a need and lots of resources, and there's an intentional focus on that as well. To our friends in the philanthropic community, we appreciate your partnership, and the Center partners very closely on many, many initiatives with the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers, and Council has been tracking a lot of work that philanthropy is doing, both in response to this current crisis and just on an ongoing basis. So they're a phenomenal partner and resource. So in terms of philanthropy, if you haven't been checking in with your nonprofit partners, please do. Just find out how they're doing, how they're making out, what they need. For nonprofits, if you are not hearing from your philanthropic partners, by all means, reach out to them. You don't have to wait, but philanthropy, if you can do that outreach, that would be really, really critical. Flexible funding, it's always something that we've been asking for and calling for collectively as part of the Doing Good Better initiative, in partnership with many, many other organizations, as well as just separately. Now is the time. Simplify your application and reporting processes. Make sure that you can help nonprofits get in touch with other information or allies or guidance. Fund advocacy. Advocacy is critically important. And if you can increase your payout, please, please consider doing that. And speaking about advocacy, don't stay on the sidelines. So much is at stake, and we need to raise our voices early, often, consistently. Speak out. Oppose the funding cuts, defend vulnerable constituencies that are being threatened in the current policies. Connect with others. You don't have to do this alone, and it's more effective if you don't. So engage with your allies and partners. Stay informed. You have lots of pipelines for communication. And change the conversation. And that means how we do talk about the programs and the services and the importance of what we do as nonprofits for our communities. We tend to be taken for granted. That has been happening for far too long. And when if those services go away, our communities will be the ones who will be hurt. I would also encourage you, again, contact your representatives early and often. Contacts with Congressman Kane, Congressman Smith, and Congressman Van Drew are critically important because they are in the majority party in the House. But contact everyone. Policymakers are looking to hear what's going on with you. So please, please make sure that they know that. This is an election year. Every year is an election year, but we have a very important election coming up in November, where the governor's office and state legislature, the assembly, are up for grabs. But nonprofits have a really important role to play in nonpartisan voter engagement. So we have a guidebook that we produced last year in partnership with the National Council of Nonprofits and Nonprofit Vote. I encourage you to check that out as far as what your organization can do. But even if your organization is not involved, or even if it is, get involved yourself. make sure you're registered to vote, make sure your friends and family and everybody you know is registered to vote and actually goes out to the polls. Again, it is absolutely always critically important, and this year is no exception. So what should our narrative be? I mean, everybody is different. I'm not trying to be too prescriptive here, but the point is we can't, I don't think we should, and lots of people have said the same thing. We need to approach our conversations as equal vital partners to community well-being, to, as I mentioned earlier, the financial well-being of our state and its residents. When someone provides funding to nonprofits, it is an investment in and for our communities. So trying to emphasize both the qualitative and the personal aspects of what we do, as well as what difference it makes economically, is absolutely critical. If we're going to continue to attract the best talent to our workforce, we have to have conversations about compensation, benefits, and working conditions, and keep those conversations going and make those changes and make sure your funders understand why this matters. Making sure that we are not abandoning diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I encourage you to check out a guidance that was issued by 16 attorneys general, including New Jersey, to try to help nonprofits and other private employers navigate DEI from an employment perspective. We have a link to it on our website, and I encourage you to check that out. And just as a reminder, we are mission-driven organizations. Our values guide everything we do, and that should underscore everything. Before I get to kind of the tail end of the formal presentation, which is just some closing comments and thoughts, I'm going to see if there are questions in the chat. And if my center colleagues can chime in if I'm missing.
There is a question asking if the elimination of Black History Month, et cetera, Hispanic Heritage Month in Washington, is that affecting New Jersey schools, or will New Jersey eliminate these recognizing events?
I have not heard that New Jersey has attempted to do that. I would defer to others or attorneys on that, but my understanding and impression is that New Jersey has embraced diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and that the recognition of Black History Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, Women's History Month, et cetera, would continue in recognition of that. That is my assumption. If I find out otherwise, I will certainly follow up and let you know. I'm just looking.
Another question is, has there been any discussion about organizations sharing services as a way to mitigate financial stress?
Yes, the short answer is yes, and that's certainly something we are encouraging organizations to consider as well. And of course, shared services or collaborations runs a spectrum from some very informal kinds of partnerships on up to mergers. In our survey, there wasn't a huge percentage of respondents who said they were really actively supporting, exploring a merger, but shared services is certainly a strategy that nonprofits are doing. I would also, related to that, encourage organizations to check out things like, if you haven't shopped around your audit or your insurance or something like that, there's a cost savings as a funding mechanism is a real tactic. So taking a look at that, looking at what kinds of benefits or discounts might be available through your memberships, whether it's the Center for Nonprofits or some other place. Those are also tactics that can be very, very helpful. Oh, Michelle Rodriguez, the question about the report about DEI initiatives, I believe you're referring to the attorneys general. We can put a link to it in the chat, or I can send it in the follow-up information to the webinar, but there should be a link on the homepage or on the homepage, and I'll get to this in a moment. There's also a link to resources to navigate uncertainty, and it's also in there. Question about accountants. Do we have lists of accountants? We do, is the short answer. If you get in touch with our team at center@njnonprofits.org, they can provide you with a list of a lot of great resources and firms that provide accounting services for nonprofits. Vetted third-party donation payment processors, we will send us an email and we'll follow up on that. I mean, we of course will be saving the chat, but we can check into our records and see what we can try to suggest.
You sort of addressed this, but the one question was, what advice do you have around engaging with private foundations? How can organizations build relationships with private funders when there's such a great need?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is some of it revolves around doing some basic research going to the library and researching places like Candid or the Foundation directory online. If you don't have the resources to subscribe to it, a number of the cooperating libraries provide that information. Attend all sorts of events that funders either host or are participating in. The Council of New Jersey Grantmakers, for example, is going to have its conference in May. I think it's May. Forgive me, Council. I know you will correct me. But later this spring, the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers is going to have a phenomenal event focused on civic engagement. Make sure you attend, because it's open to nonprofits, it's open to funders, and it's one of many opportunities to be in the room together in community. A number of funders host their own events for constituencies, either geographically or otherwise. So there are lots of different ways to spark those conversations. Those are just a few suggestions. If you're looking for specific funding opportunities, there is a funding opportunities page on our website. We don't post everything, we can't possibly, but we do post anything we become aware of. So certainly check that out as well. That also links to other resources for grant seekers and others who are looking for funds. There was a question early on about how many people were on the webinar. We had upwards of 260 registrants, and I see at the moment there are 186, I believe, on right now in real time. Given the rapid changes at the federal level, how will the center keep up with evolving nonprofit challenges over the coming 6 to 12 months? Wow, Lucy, that is quite a question, and quite the challenge and opportunity. I will say we're doing things in a few different ways. We are staying very connected with our national network, the National Council of Nonprofits, and our sister state associations. So that's one really important way. We are also tracking ourselves, the various developments as best we can on some of the websites that I mentioned and elsewhere. We want to be in communication with everybody on this call, with the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers, with other membership organizations. We are quite literally, all of us, in a drinking from a fire hose moment right now. One of the things that is really important that we've tried to keep in mind is not everybody can possibly track every single thing or take the lead on every single issue. So one thing we have on our website in the advocacy section is a basic list of some of the select organizations that tend to lead on certain issues. So if, in terms of environmental protection or mental health or affordable housing or various sectors within the nonprofit community, we list a few organizations on the national level and on the state level that tend to be very involved in those issues, so that everybody can connect with the issues that matter most to them. We always welcome suggestions. So if you see a source that you think should be on there and you don't see it, let us know. But I think the other thing is, we are, as Renee said, keeping in touch regularly with our elected officials. We've spent time in DC or with our representatives or US senators. So, and again, I certainly recommend that early and often for everybody, because they are trying to stay abreast of what's going on in the community, and they're getting inundated. So they need to hear from us as far as what's going on, and they will continue to do that. So much more to come there, both in terms of big picture and not. The other thing, this is a great opportunity to do a save the date for the joint policy forum that we, along with the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers, will be co-hosting in August. So stay tuned for that. That will be, it's a great opportunity for policymakers, change makers to get together and discuss where we are headed in terms of policy. So much more on that, but I hope that was helping. There was a question about differing regional impacts, North Jersey versus South. South, of course, doesn't have quite as robust a resource pool as some of the other areas of the state, but I will say the funding decisions and the impacts are pretty widespread, and they are hitting nonprofits at all levels and all geographies. I can do a little bit more of a deeper dive when it comes to those regions, but I don't recall anything jumping out in that respect, just because of the sheer magnitude and depth of what has been going on. Someone asked about how does 271 compare with last couple of years? Actually, a little higher. People were very, very good about weighing in about their circumstances. I think they recognize the importance of the situation that we're all in and being able to communicate what's going on. So we actually had higher participation this year than we have in some recent. So appreciate everybody, again, who took the time to respond. And we will, again, sometimes we do rapid response surveys as well, and we know that these surveys have been going fast and furious. And to the extent that you are able to respond to those, I believe United Way or Greater Mercer has just issued one, Nonprofit Finance Fund nationally. And we know that there's plenty of other things that you have to do besides complete surveys. And we're trying to do our best, at least on our end, to consolidate and not duplicate what others are doing. But it's again, offices, this information fuels advocacy, it fuels good policy making. So we really, really appreciate your taking that time. Other questions before I start to bring us home?
Linda, I just wanted to mention, we, on the DEI question, we did have a webinar a week or so ago by Lloyd Freeman, who is a Trenton attorney, and he will be doing 3 more events for us. That recording, that was not recorded for a variety of reasons, including people maybe sharing some things that they don't want public. But we will have another one on April 11th. We don't have it on the calendar yet, but make sure you're on the center's email list. But we will be following up on that. And part of what Mr. Freeman was talking about was what's really legal and illegal. There's been a lot of turmoil around the administration's banning of anything DEI, and that is not necessary. It's certainly not legally required. And so it's really good to talk about this and to ask questions. So that's, and so put April 11th on your calendar, because he will be clarifying more based on what's the situation is at the time.
Thank you, Debbie. And you actually were very prescient as far as where we were going next with the discussion. So just a few things before we part ways. There are a lot of resources. A lot of great organizations have been putting together really, really helpful information, guidance, suggestions. We posted something on our website. We have 2 pages. One is called Navigating Uncertainty in 2025. It's more like a blog post with some kind of thoughts. And the other is resources to navigate uncertainty. And it's classified according to things like fundraising or financial stability or governance or data or cybersecurity. Again, we welcome suggestions about other resources to add there, but we built on a list that was started by our friends in Minnesota, but we've been adding to it as well. So take a look at both of those things. They will be updated regularly as we become aware of helpful resources. So look, use, share, and make any suggestions that you can. As Debbie said, our events page includes not only events that New Jersey Center for Nonprofits offers, but colleagues across the state or perhaps in other states. So take a look at that, check that regularly. Lots and lots of events or knowledge sharing to be had. And in terms of our upcoming events, just a couple to keep in mind. One is Policy World Wednesdays. Again, we partner with the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers on this. It is the second Wednesday of every month, so the next one will be next week at 12:30. It lasts for an hour, and we dive into what we all are seeing, hearing, doing, about policy. You do not have to be a policy wonk or a seasoned policy expert. If you're interested, join us. It is free. You just need to register. And there are links on our website. As Debbie mentioned, the series with Lloyd Freeman, Beyond the Rulings. The next one will be April 11th. And this is a joint partnership with a number of organizations, a Nonprofit Professionals of Color Collective, Pro Bono Partnership, Nonprofit Connect, Grunin Foundation, Support Center, Gathering Ground, and us. So we're really, really proud to partner with these amazing organizations. And Lloyd Freeman has been he's a phenomenal speaker and resource. So please join us for that if you can. If you are a member of the center, please join us for Member Mondays. We do this every other Monday from 12:30 to 1:15, where we just come together in community to talk about what we are experiencing, seeing. You can ask questions. We and your peers will answer them, and on and on. It's a great collegial gathering, and we hope that you will join us. And as a reminder, if you're not the member of the New Jersey Center for Nonprofits, we hope you will consider joining. Use Horse NJ, our state animal, and save 10% on your dues. We're happy to answer any questions about membership. Feel free to reach out to any member of our team. Once again, you can, at the conclusion of this webinar, you'll be able to find our full survey report on our website at njnonprofits.org. And once again, our deep, deep thanks to Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey for supporting this year's survey report, and our deep thanks to all of you who completed the survey. We are not alone. You're not alone. We can do this together. We can get through this together, and it, in fact, is the only way we are going to do that. So please stay in touch. Stay in community. We want to hear from you. We want to know how we can be helpful to you. Keep those lines of communication open. My deep thanks to our center team, to all of you for doing the most important work in communities, and this is more vital now than ever. So thank you. We look forward to working alongside you and to staying in touch. Thank you very much and take good care.